Welcome to the Music Business Buddy, the podcast decoding how the modern music industry actually works. I'm Jonny Amos, industry consultant, artist manager, producer, educator, and author of The Music Business for Music Creators. Every Wednesday, I explore the ideas, technology, and industry shifts shaping the future of music. This show helps creators navigate the rapidly changing business of music. Hello everybody and welcome. Okay, in this week's episode I am joined by Grayson Sanders, CEO of Chordal. Chordal is a company that I mentioned back in episode 105 where I talked about micro licensing. Now, for anybody that's not familiar with micro licensing, think of it as a kind of very fast, instant permission clearance to use music, songs and recordings of music within indie games, YouTube content, independent filmmaker content, social media posts. So we can tag music inside of a TikTok post, for example, but not if we want to actually use it to promote a brand. And there's a real kind of grey area there. And it's a very, very strong emerging market, especially for rights holders that have their rights already set in place with music publishers, with record companies, etc. But I do believe that moving forward, that market will open up to independent music creators and their managers, etc. And this is an area that I believe Chordal will start to become one of the market leaders, if not the number one company for this. So I've managed to get Grayson on. He's a cracking fella, a really, really, really great guy at the top of what I do believe is a superb company. So I shall hand over to the interview now. Grayson, it's nice to meet you. I have been hearing so many great things about Chordal and about you and about your team and all the good work that you're doing. It's really, really, really good to have you here. I've got a few questions for you. Let's start with this, right? The internet has, well, it's done many things, right? But it's certainly made content creation infinitely scalable. So why has music licensing not managed to scale with it?
Yeah, well, that's the $1 million question, right? And I think it could be helpful before jumping into the problem to just do like a really quick primer on how music licensing works for those tuning in who might not be as familiar with this weird kind of archaic practice in our industry.
Great shout. Yeah, let's do it.
So I'll try my best to pack this into the elevator version, but music rights are a really interesting area of intellectual property because you commonly have multiple people that can own the same, can own a piece of the same thing. And so you'll have maybe multiple songwriters represented by multiple publishers, each with a percentage of a song. And you have a record label or an artist who own their master. And what's interesting about sync licensing as compared to maybe some of the other areas of licensing in the music industry is that you need all those parties who have a participation in the song to license their own rights directly with that buyer or licensee, as we refer to them. And the way that has been done historically is through contracting with everyone individually. And at first, before you even get there, you need to figure out who owns the pieces. You got to do some detective work. And then, you're then dealing with invoicing to all these different people. And that's just to get one license deal done. And so that system was set up at a time when, well, most of licensing was done for these big one-off projects, right? And even though it was a bit slow, you did have professionals managing this process, and there was time to facilitate it. In the internet economy, obviously things are moving pretty much instantaneously and being posted and produced and published at incredibly high volumes. And so it starts to become like preposterous to think about going to, if you want to get the rights to put a song in your podcast or in, your indie video game you're producing, trying to navigate that web of complexity of, who owns this song and how do I get the rights to it and how do I go negotiate with them? I don't even know what a fair market rate is and all these things. So as a result, the the industry around licensing music by artists, not the other hemisphere, by the way, of this is like royalty free music, production music that has kind of been fulfilling that need on the internet. We're we're obviously focused on the process of simplifying licensing for artists and commercial music. This side has kind of struggled to keep up with that momentum that the internet economy has sort of necessitated. So that's that kind of opportunity space in between where a fair amount of people are looking at it right now and saying this is something that we really need to fix because this is how this is a viable income stream that's not really being fully tapped into. Hope that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Extremely well put as well, because it's a bit of a complex beast, isn't it?
If it is.
There's a lot of different people, different rights holders, and it is somewhat opaque, let's say. But it's found a way to make itself work well. But it's also, I often still think it's a relatively sort of new thing in some ways, a new subset of the music and media industry, because like just the other day, for example, my young son, I was playing him some music and soundtracks and 80s films and stuff, and we were listening to, well, we watched the Karate Kid, right? And I was like, man, this music's so good. I was like, who's the music supervisor on this? So I looked and there kind of wasn't really one, and yet the supervision was brilliant, and then I kind of did a little bit of a deeper dive, and I was like, right, there weren't really music supervisors in the 80s. Like, it wasn't really a job yet, and I thought, isn't that fascinating? Like that's not that long ago, really. And yet that wasn't even really a job that people kind of recognized,
Yeah, I mean, the first generation of supervisors are still working today.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thought. I hadn't really thought about that. Yeah, they're still active. Yeah. Wow, that's weird. So let's talk about Chordal, right? So you kind of primarily work with sort of record companies and music publishers in the way that you suggested there, and it makes perfect sense that you are, because they've got the permissions in place and publishers dealing with the writers and masters from the label side and stuff. But I noticed on your website that there's a kind of coming soon working with artists and managers. Is that, where are you at with that? Because that seems really exciting for like independent music creators to potentially work with you.
Yeah, so currently we are, to your point, primarily a business to business platform. We're working on a very complicated and dry problem where some pre-existing knowledge of the rights management world has been kind of a prerequisite and really useful in the early days. We've been around for 6 years, by the way, which seems kind of like a long time, but not really when you think about the amount of complexity that we've needed to chip away at. So there was a reason why we couldn't just from day one say we're opening up the gates and anyone can come sign up. It needed to be structured in a certain way. But that being said, over the last 3 to 4 months, we've started to let in songwriters and artists and management companies who are connected to copyrights that are already in the system that were brought by a label or publisher. So the goal for this phase one is to, fill out as many missing pieces on some of those songs as possible, because in many cases you might have maybe an independent label on the master side, maybe one major publisher on one share, and then 2 empty shares, right? And so our goal is to fill out all the shares within the platform, because that's what enables us to provide these interesting licensing products on top of that. Then in the medium term perspective, we definitely have a plan for how artists and songwriters are part of this ecosystem. I can't talk in detail about it, but it's very much a part of the overall Chordal vision.
Wow, that's exciting. Good for you. I mean, that Again, that makes sense because if you've got, let's say, for example, one song that's within the ecosystem and they've got, let's say, a songwriter that doesn't have a publisher, you
Yeah.
need their involvement, don't you? So it makes
Yes.
sense to have that missing piece of the value chain there.
Mm.
I suppose, I mean, as wonderful as it is to be able to make Chordal open to, independent artists, smaller labels, independent, artist managers and stuff, it comes with, let's say, an education lift that's required.
Yeah.
So for example, let's say an independent artist goes to a sync agent and the sync agent says, right, we want your performance release agreement, we want your studio release, we want all these different things which are required in order for, the music to be licensed successfully. It might perhaps be that independent artists though say, well, I didn't know about that actually, or, that lovely lady that played violin on my recording 2 years ago, she was actually my friend's neighbor, which is lovely and it's noble, but it's also quite problematic, right?
Yeah.
So all those kind of education lifts, they come with those problems.
Yeah.
I would think.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I don't think in many cases the issues that happen more on the independent side is not like willful ignorance. It's just you don't know what you don't know. And in this space, there are so many, the devil's in the details. And it's really difficult when you're just starting out as an artist to fully understand in depth all of the ways you can monetize. But not only just that, go that extra layer deeper into the legalities behind it and why you need to have certain pieces of metadata structured a certain way, or all these things can be a lot to think about. And so what we can't really enable is a situation where someone is just rapidly clicking through boxes saying, I have the rights, I have the rights, I have the rights. That kind of ends up being paper thin at a certain point. There are platforms and many large distributors that have kind of like opt-in structures where you just click a box and say, yeah, I have the rights, but it's starting to play out in a kind of an ugly way. Some of those practices were done 3 and 4 years ago, asking artists, hey, I have my publishing. And they're like, okay, I'm just going to say yes so I can get to the next screen. But then, once that goes into the real world and practice, that can create a bit of a knock-on effect. So we want to avoid that. And to your point, have a really sensible way that we verify identity, verify data quality as much as possible when we start getting into the bigger scale of user bases. Yeah.
Yeah, that all adds up. Yeah, because I've noticed quite a lot of independent distributors that will kind of say, hey, we're partnering up with this library or this platform over here. And on the one hand, it feels like a sales point so that artists work with them, which I can understand. But on the other hand, it's also saying,
Mm.
well, just because they're your partner to aggregate through to stores doesn't mean that they can actually tackle the licensing and the intricacies required on permissions to be able to say, yes, we can actually work with you and get that onto this placement
Right.
over here. There's all those missing pieces, right? That that
Right.
you mentioned earlier. So we've established that the sort of the creator economy is it's exploding and millions of videos are being created every day. Does that inevitably lead us towards a world of kind of micro licensing rather than just like a handful of like blockbuster placements?
So I don't think it leads us to a world where blockbuster placements go away, but I think it leads us to a world where micro licensing is vital as an income stream. I'll talk about both of those maybe independently. Traditional sync, traditional licensing, which we would put in what the blockbuster placements into that bucket, right? It's a high value, high visibility type license into a major advertisement or into a film trailer or a soundtrack. That's not going anywhere. There's a whole construct around it. Maybe production changes and evolves, and you know the role of a music supervisor might evolve over time. But I don't really see that changing. It's a really important part of the music industry and the film industry. So there's when there's a two-sided need, I think a market will continue to exist. That being said, micro licensing is maybe even just 10 years ago was kind of a dirty word. It was associated with sort of cheapening or racing to the bottom in a certain way, your value as an artist. And in the sync licensing world, we always talk about precedent. So you try to establish a rate, and then that artist is not going to go below that rate unless there's some sort of extenuating circumstance or they really want to do this documentary or whatever. But like, you always try to work up that price. The micro licensing methodologies are a little different, and I think that the music industry as a whole is really starting to come around to this idea that, well, number one, like we talked about before, the internet is moving at a pace that it just makes it really difficult to license in a traditional way. 1,000 licenses at $1,000 means something. Number two. Number three, it can be done in a way that doesn't actually cannibalize your other side, your blockbuster side. So, that's a big fear, right? Like, if we're going to do this, does that mean that it's going to cheapen our song for this stuff? The culture around TikTok, as an example, has really changed the way people think about music paired with visuals already in a way where it's just become an expectation. And then, I think all of those three things have really started to, well, and then there's the giant elephant in the room, which is AI coming in, right? So there's that thing of like, wait, maybe we should figure this out and really see if there is a there for this to be a viable way to make money outside of this, the usual suspects of digital sales and streaming and traditional licensing. So you do have a spotlight shining on this right now, and I think a lot of people feel it, which is exciting because we've been in this thing for ages, and it felt like there were just these, the industry always weathers these trends of like, oh, it's NFTs now, oh, it's metaverse. I think right now it's like licensing is a problem. We should figure this out. So yeah, I think that it is growing fast, and we're going to see within the next 5 years, I'm hoping, an established standard and processes around this being, just how the music industry transacts with the creator economy.
Yeah, that's I agree. By the way, Grayson, I didn't realise you were 6 years into the journey. I didn't know that before we spoke. That's actually, it's actually quite a substantial amount of time when you think about, in the grand old scheme of things, 6 years goes by quite quickly, doesn't it? But you've been in this space for 6 years. That's a lot, actually, relatively speaking. It's I commend you for that, because I think that there's such a future to what you're doing, and you've clearly worked so hard over the years to get it to where it's at right now. It's really exciting. You mentioned the elephant in the room, AI. How can we not these days, right?
Gotta go there.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of discussion around AI creating music, right? But do you think that actually the bigger opportunity is actually in AI helping us to manage rights and licensing and attribution, more effectively?
Well, I guess it depends on who you're asking about the opportunity.
Yeah, that's true.
We use AI a lot. We're not a generative AI music company at all. We're not even involved in it, but we use AI a ton in our stack, as it were, and that's product language for in our platform. So we use AI for for rights cleaning and rights matching. It does a great job working with large data sets. It's reduces a lot of the human error comparing large data sets, finding overlap. We also use and provide a lot of AI technology to our users for search and discovery and personalization and things like that. So, I mean, I think that AI is just a huge umbrella term that is commonly conflated with all sorts of different things. And, you know, you just really need to be careful when you're talking about it, because someone hears it and they're like, wow, AI is going to take my job. And then there's like, okay, well, maybe that particular application is going after a specific, it's trying to automate a certain thing, but like this other thing is actually helping you do your job in a way that either you couldn't do it before, or now you can actually go out and take a walk with your dog, and then when you come back this thing is like help you move on to the next task.
Yeah, that's a good. I'm glad you said that. Actually, I find that deeply reassuring, because what you just said then is the same thing that I say to so many different people across the music industry, across music education, definitely, about how we kind of throw lots and lots of things under the AI bus.
Yeah.
And actually, it's deeply unfair and wildly inaccurate, because there are so many different layers and tools and different, and levels of what is morally right and all that kind of stuff. It's just too unfair, isn't it, to just have two letters explain loads of stuff. I mean, it's wild, isn't it, really, when you think about it like that.
Yeah, and also, I mean, when you get into the nitty gritty on how the technology works, machine learning algorithms are hugely different from one another, and some don't even involve large language models, which has become the general understanding of what AI is. And so, yeah, it's just a whole suite of different technologies and applications that really can bring about positive, productive developments, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think especially as we start to move towards an era um, where technology can understand music or music elements when it's analyzed, because then it kind of reaches a point where we can go, okay, we understand a little bit more about the marketplace or the suitability or how it aids a visual or the kind of story that can assist what that song, where it came from. That's really exciting, especially when it gets grouped together with text. And then all of a sudden, it might be then that people that said, "Oh no, I don't want to be a part of that AI thing," actually, we sold 93 licenses for that song. Without those tools, we wouldn't have got it. So I don't mind it now, but it's a tricky one, that's for sure. Have we spent, we as mankind, if you will, to be philosophical, have we spent too much time building systems that help people to discover music, and maybe not enough time in actually building systems that help music to find its audience and its buyer?
Oh, that's interesting. I love a question that starts with mankind.
When I said that, I immediately thought of the pro wrestler, Mankind. I was like, where am I going with this?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good throwback. No, when you said that, I started to go back to the beginning with the countdown and picturing those like heavy sound effects.
All right,
on the countdown.
yeah.
I was like, this is getting real now. Well, I think the question is kind of, in some ways, depending on how you interpret it, are two sides of the same coin, right? On one hand, like to your point, there's been a lot of emphasis on personalization in search experiences on the web in general. So every platform, for the most part, that you use claim to be, getting smarter and more personalized to you. But I think what's interesting is like we're seeing, we speaking as Chordal, but also just we as a society, I think are seeing an interesting shift in the younger generation right now back towards human curation, which is surprising to say back because it doesn't feel like we've been away for that long. But actually, we're a solid decade plus into platforms claiming that they know what you want better than you know it yourself. And almost to a creepy degree, right? When you're like, I just mentioned that, my toothbrush, I need a new toothbrush. And now I'm getting like an ad on my phone 3 seconds later on Instagram. Um, there, young Gen Z and Gen A are starting to move back towards like manual community-based curation platforms. Like Tumblr is having a moment right now, which is wild, and I love that. Makes me happy because that was a huge platform when we were younger. Um, but I think that what's cool about that is that it then puts the human back in the front seat of saying like, you know what, you know, I'm an expert in this, or I've actually spent more time on this thing probably than you have because I'm obsessed with it. And here are the 5 things that that I'd like to put in front of you that to check out. And it's like old school music journalism even. And full circle to the previous point we were discussing, like as AI continues to grow and you've got all this proliferation of content that with the bar is so low to produce anything that you're just flooding the internet. And everyone's like, well, good music's going away. I actually don't think so. I think there's going to be more amazing music. There's also going to be a lot of crap music, but it's what's going to be important is the trusted sources of curation and the ability to get that above the noise. And I don't think recommendation systems are really going to be able to do it like, community curation. And so, to your question, uh, I really think that this is going to happen organically, and it already is. This idea that, in the end of the day, I'm going to ask my buddy or this person I trust, like, what do you like? What do what's the service that you are trying recently that you're excited about? Or what's the artist that you just heard about 3 weeks ago that, at that show as who's an opener and you were like, wow, it was insane. Um, that's where I would like to see things go, but I think it's going to ultimately just be what happens with society because that's where we've been for the previous 20,000 years before before discovery algorithms.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, do you know, I have also noticed that swing back, if you like.
Oh, you have.
Yeah, yeah. I spoke to a lot of different people about it in the business. It's a very interesting subject because it's back for us, but forward for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very, very, very interesting subject. It's like,
Have you ever heard of just like have you ever heard of just like asking a friend? That's crazy.
Right. Yeah. That's well, do you know, but do you know what? One of the many exciting facets of that actually is that with content creators now having the ability to be able to say, this song over here, like it, maybe people don't know it that well, but it's perfect for this story I'm trying to get across here in this short that I've built or in this animated story I'm trying to tell or whatever it might be. And they can do that now. And it's always, as you well know, been so difficult to be able to do that on a micro licensing level because it's like, well, if I try and do that, I'm going to have to pay this fee over here that's like huge because the way that the infrastructure allows me to do that is no different from like, a Hollywood blockbuster trying to do it. And that's right. Crazy, right? So, I love it that I saw some stats recently about kind of the effect of what Chordal has been doing with TikTok, which I thought was really cool. Can you touch on any of that for us? Because it looked to be working really well.
Yeah, no, it's been pretty great just to see just the traction of this. I guess you'd call it an initiative, and how it's grown over the last year plus. So just to rewind for people who might not be familiar with how music on TikTok works, or really any social platform, if you are a regular user account, so you and me, if I log in just on my personal account, you're probably familiar with the ability to find a song and add it to your video. The ability for you to do that is made possible by these licenses called blanket licenses, which are done by the majors and some of the larger independents. that negotiate with the social platforms. And so what those blanket licenses allow are for user generated content up to a certain length to be, basically a frictionless experience. And so you can just find a song and use it. Those licenses do not cover brand usage, so promoted usage or business use of music, because that would require a sync license. And so there's this weird gray area, this weird murky middle space that is not really enforced on those platforms, but it is not legal. And so as a result, you have a lot of brands, and a brand could be Adidas, but it also could be a small ice cream shop, in a small town who's buying a digital ad to promote their shop. That's a branded paid use. That should be a sync license, but on the social media platforms up until pretty recently, really just you had to have that pre-existing understanding, and you had to just be a good actor. And so, as you can imagine, you have just a massive infringement all over the platforms of brands that either willfully or just out of pure ignorance have been doing this. TikTok, they started an initiative called the CML, the Commercial Music Library, and the goal behind this was to provide a dedicated library where, if you're a business account, you can go in and micro license that music for your promoted video, and you can buy advertisements legally, and you're all covered. In order to make that library function well, with popular music, because that's the goal, right? To have songs that people know in there. You need to have a pretty sophisticated structure behind that for rights management. So who owns all these songs? How do we get them in, contractually aligned with being involved in this? How do we report to everybody? How do we pay everybody? It's quite a lift to build that system, and that's basically what Chordal is and what Chordal does. So we partnered with them, and we launched this integration in August of 2025. And so, in a nutshell, what it means is, if you want to get your music into the TikTok commercial music library so that it can be used by brands on the platform, but maybe you don't control all of your rights. Maybe you only have the master recording, or you're a songwriter on a song, you just have a piece. You can use Chordal as a way to clear your share of your song for the TikTok library. And what Chordal's system does, we call it instant clear, but the way that it works is basically it acts as a gate, and it collects the clearances from all those parties on the track. So imagine a pie, right? And you have all the slices. Each slice gets filled out, and when the full pie is complete, that song can fly over to TikTok to be legally licensed in that space. At the end of every period, all the data from the usage of what happened in TikTok flows back to us, and our system basically looks at the shares that everyone controls of those songs across pretty huge repertoire, and then gives everyone the data and the royalties that match with their own shares. So it handles all that in an automated way. And so what that enables is for this much more streamlined approach for TikTok to scale up this offering, make more music available for micro licensing, make sure everyone gets paid fairly, and then rights holders kind of have a nice environment inside Chordal to manage all that stuff. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, and is explained with finesse.
Thank you.
What's even more impressive is the fact that you've made it happen. And I congratulate you, man. I really do, because it acts as an absolute anchor of evidence to people that not only is micro licensing a game changer, but that it's accessible and it's achievable, and it is as scalable as the content that it supports. And the songs become as scalable as the visuals that the stories are, trying to tell. It's wonderful.
Well said. Thank you.
It's wonderful. It really is. I really wholeheartedly congratulate you for what you're doing. It's brilliant, mate. It really is. Okay, final question for you, Grace. Now, I'm interested to see what you think about this. So let's flash forward to 2035. What does licensing a song look like at that point? Is it still a negotiation between humans, or is it, an instant transaction happening inside of platforms and creative tools?
So I'll go back to what I said earlier. I think that the big projects, the ones where you have a lot of humans involved, and it's super curatorial and it's a cultural moment. Those are going to be projects with people working on them. I really don't see, even 10 years out, I don't see that going away. There are too many. First of all, I mean, there are too many motivations that are not just business, opacity and frictions created by middlemen. It's like actually a motivating thing to produce a piece of art that makes an impact in culture. And so I think that there are a lot of people that, you know, make that system work, and I don't see that going away. But what I do see, maybe sooner than 2035, is that for a huge part of the content out there on the internet and in the gaming space and in the podcasting world, you're going to be able to go and, as close to a one-click license as possible, get the music that you want to get and be able to publish it securely and know that behind that people are getting paid. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of already here, but not at industry scale. I think we'll be there soon.
Okay. I think you will be as well. Yeah, and I'm excited about it. Yeah, that's a good point. So actually, it's really about coexistence, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not one replaces the other. It's we need both. They both have their space. One works and has done since, I don't know, the 90s, let's say, and the other one that's needed to work for a while now and hasn't until now.
That's what I
Because
think.
yeah, I mean, you're right. Actually, I never really thought about it that way. But we still need those big cultural moments, those moments, the the James Gunns of the world that just take a song and go, let's place that there, and you go,
Yeah.
that shouldn't work, but it's brilliant.
Yeah.
We need that, right? And
Yeah.
that's a different art form, a different thing than what we're talking about here.
And you know what? I should say that if I don't know James Gunn, so I'm just commenting. I'm shooting from the hip here. But if James Gunn had the ability to find the songs that he likes and just use them easily in his film, I'm sure he would. I'm sure the people that are working for him would do it. The frictions that might be kind of an important friction that prevents that from happening are the music rights holders who represent the copyrights and the artists and the songwriters who are saying, this music is elevating this thing that you're producing, and it is achieving a wide impact and a wide audience. It should be valued in a certain way. And so with that comes a conversation, because every project can vary so much. So it's really the music rights holders that I think will hold the line
Yeah.
on that, and I believe they should.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And there's a really, really neat little crossover there for the next, I don't know, the 14-year-old James Gunns of the future that need access to the right songs, that, select something that then go, okay, how do we actually remunerate rights holders? That's always been the thing,
Mm.
right? So, no, I really congratulate you for what you're building. Yeah. And, good luck moving forward, Grace. And you won't need it. Everything's going to be fine. But thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate it. We all do.
Oh, thanks, Johnny. I appreciate the words too. It's been really nice chatting with you.
Okay, there you go, everybody. See, I told you he's a top fella, didn't I? What a super guy and what a super company. I think that what Chordal are doing is really, really, really game changing, right? We heard a lot of insight there from Grayson. He has been at this for a few years now. And I think that Chordal have come a really, really long way. And I boldly predict they're going to go a lot further. within this space yet. So that is why I think it's really, really good for all of us to look ahead, right? Now, if we think about this on a sort of more holistic level, right? The story of storytelling is key here, right? Storytelling is absolutely everything in music and in media. Now, whether that could be, if you think about like an independent artist, you know, they've got to tell their story through social media, or it could be journalists, it could be a record company, it could be a sync agent, wherever it is. It's all about storytelling, isn't it? And music is a big part of that storytelling. Now, we know that that works, and the infrastructure, however opaque it may be at times, it does work. It has worked. It continues to work on a bigger budget level. However, people are not watching legacy television like they used to. People are not going to the cinema like they used to, right? I wish they were. I do, but not everybody does, right? And that's okay, because the times are changing. But music is struggling to keep up with those changing times, right? And that is where Chordal come into this. Now, remember, everybody, right? When I endorse somebody or a company, I do it because I want to do it, because I think it adds value to you to know about them. So Chordal are not paying me to talk about them and what they do. I believe that they have a very big future in this space going forward, and I think that you could have a part of it too. So have a think about the subject of micro licensing and what Chordal do and what you do and what storytelling does, and link all those things together, because that could be crucial in the discovery of music and the role it plays in people's lives. Okay, that's enough from me today. Have a great day, everybody, and may the force be with you.
The music